It's Donald Trump versus the American system. He wants the system to bow down to him, whether it's the courts, Congress, or US agencies, and he'll do anything necessary in terms of dog whistling and calling people out, even if it means violence, to achieve that aim.
Donald Trump, because he took to social media yesterday on his very own platform, Truth Social, and he announced that he expects to be arrested on Tuesday on charges of an alleged hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. And in a disturbing echo of events of January 2021, he called on his supporters to protest. Now, the former president didn't offer any evidence to back up his claim, and a spokesperson for Mr. Trump said he was not being notified of any arrest. But the Manhattan District Attorney is investigating the allegation. So exactly how much trouble is the former president in? Scott Lucas, a professor of American Studies at the University of Birmingham and an expert in US and British foreign policy. Scott, lovely to have you on.
Thank you so much, Alex. It's great to be here.
Right, well, we're used to Donald Trump making all sorts of statements, but why has he made this one, do we think, Scott?
Well, because for once, Donald Trump may be reflecting part of the truth in that prosecutors have indicated that an indictment by the grand jury in Manhattan may be close. They did that, in fact, a couple of weeks ago when they went to Trump's lawyers and said, look, if Trump wants to present his side of the case to the grand jury before they decide on the indictment, he needs to do so now. And it is quite likely that Trump's lawyers have been told that the indictment is soon coming forward. Trump either was told that or heard about it, which is why he took to the Truth Social on Saturday in an attempt to seize the narrative, really to obscure the facts of the case, to throw mud up against the wall, as well as issuing a dog whistle call both to his supporters and to Republican politicians.
And Scott, just clarify for us the differences between an indictment and an arrest.
Well, an arrest can occur before an indictment.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, under British law, you might know that someone might be arrested on suspicion of a crime, but until an indictment is returned, they do not face, as it were, a formal charge that will go to trial. In this case, Donald Trump has not yet been arrested, but if an indictment is handed down, he, of course, will have to be arrested. He can no longer basically stay outside of the court system, and we will then have that question of if this indictment will proceed to a trial, when that hearing would be and how long that might take.
Now, his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, has been very heavily involved in this case concerning Stormy Daniels. Just tell us exactly what the criminal investigation has been looking into. What is Donald Trump accused of having done?
Well, it's really important, Alexis, because there will be a lot of mud thrown on the wall to establish the facts which lie behind a charge, which is likely to be a financial felony charge. It's not just that Donald Trump allegedly arranged for $130,000 to be paid through Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels in October 2016 over an alleged, well, in fact, an actual sexual encounter between Trump and Daniels 10 years earlier. It is the timing of that the payment was made just a few weeks before the US presidential election to keep any story of the affair outside of the press before the vote. And even more importantly, it's the fact that the money was paid not from Trump himself personally. That would have probably been legal, or at least would have evaded a charge. It was that money was paid from the Trump organization's funds, from companies' funds. And it's not just that it was paid from Trump organization funds, it was falsely recorded in the Trump organization records as legal expenses. So it's the combination of Donald Trump allegedly using company money rather than his own, and then allegedly trying to cover it up with a false record, which leads not just to misrepresentation, which could be a misdemeanor charge, but with basically a deliberate attempt of what amounts to financial fraud, which is a felony charge.
Okay. I'm assuming Donald Trump denies all those charges. The other troubles that Donald Trump is facing have to do with Georgia. Tell us a little bit about where we're at with that investigation.
Well, again, we're in the middle of a grand jury investigation in Georgia in which charges could be returned this spring, and this has to do with election interference. The allegation is that in Georgia, Trump and a group of his associates, including, for example, people like Rudy Giuliani, his lawyer, tried to install what are called fake electors. Now, the electors are the people who are selected during the presidential election, and those went to Joe Biden. He won the state by about 12,000 votes. And the allegation is that through pressure on politicians, through manipulation of records, that Trump and his inner circle tried to install their own people, which would be very illegal, both under Georgia law, but of course under federal law. And that again would bring felony charges if it proceeds further.
And finally, and you and I have spoken about this many times before, Scott, his tax returns. Now, there was breakthrough on that the tax returns now had the ability to be made public. They haven't done so. So what's going on with Donald Trump's tax returns?
Well, they were part, again, of wider investigations, particularly a civil investigation by the New York State Attorney General, which has already led to civil convictions against the Trump Organization, and by the Manhattan District Attorney. So you have seen, in fact, already that the tax records are part of business records that have led to the conviction of the Trump Organization's chief financial officer, Mr. Weisselberg, as well as the Trump Organization itself, which has paid a very heavy fine for its transgression. So the tax returns, the headline is, when will we see all of the returns? The important thing is they are already part of the multiple investigations, which could bring further criminal charges this year against Trump, even as he stands for president.
And yet, Scott, at the same time, when we look at the polls, it seems that Donald Trump is pulling ahead of his rival Ron DeSantis in the race to get the nomination to stand for the Republican Party at the next elections in 2024. Are all these investigations actually making Donald Trump more powerful within his base and the Republican Party?
Well, that's what the Trump camp will say. I mean, it's going to be paradoxical that Donald Trump will claim he's a victim, while at the same time saying, but I'm getting stronger because of this. I think we have to be very careful about the polls. First of all, it's still almost a year to the first Republican primary. And of course, it is 18 months before we actually have the general election. And then secondly, you will have a portion of the Republican Party that come hell or high water will stand with Donald Trump, but you'll have a portion of the Republican Party now that I think will come hell or high water stand against him. In other words, it's not going to be a single candidate sweeping to victory in primaries. It's going to be a very fragmented race, not just between Trump and DeSantis, but between other candidates who will come in as well, such as the former Vice President Mike Pence. So I think at this point, saying how this will affect 2024, look, that's a sideshow. The main event right now is, will Donald Trump eventually can be convicted in a court on a criminal charge, even as he attempts to get back into the White House?
And finally, Scott, one of his messages to his supporters on Truth Social yesterday was protest, take our nation back. I mean, that sends a chill down many people's spines because, of course, of the January 6th events in 2021. How worrying is this sort of call to arms, if we can call it that, from Donald Trump? Are we likely to see trouble on Tuesday?
Well, Donald Trump's got previous on this. In 2020, when demonstrators, Trumpist demonstrators, were challenging coronavirus measures for public safety, he called on them to effectively invade state capitol houses, such as happened in Michigan. As you mentioned, on January 6, 2021, when he was trying to overturn the election, he called on his supporters to go to the Capitol and block the vote confirming Joe Biden as president in the Electoral College. And we saw the violence that ensued. So let us be very clear here. When Donald Trump says protest for the sake of the nation, two things. One is he's putting no limits on what that protest could be. And two, it is not a protest for the sake of the nation. It's a protest for the sake of Donald Trump, because the bigger story here, Alexis, beyond this individual criminal case and others, is Donald Trump versus the American system. He wants the system to bow down to him, whether it's the courts, Congress, or U.S. agencies, and he'll do anything necessary in terms of dog whistling and calling people out, even if it means violence, to achieve that aim.